As we continue our study of ancient Egypt, it's important we talk about the different time periods in ancient Egypt. The first is the early dynastic period. Around 3100 BC, Menes rose to power in Upper Egypt. He wanted to unite Lower and Upper Egypt. Therefore, Menes invaded and attacked Lower Egypt. He also married a princess from Lower Egypt to strengthen his control. Many historians consider Menes to be the first pharaoh. A pharaoh is a title used by the rulers of ancient Egypt. Menes was also founded the first dynasty. A dynasty means a series of rulers from the same family. Egypt's first dynasty was a theocracy. A theocracy is a government ruled by religious leaders such as priests or a monarch who was thought to be divine. Thought to be divine means sent to earth by the gods. Eventually, rivals challenged Egypt's first dynasty for power. The challengers took over Egypt and created the second dynasty. Over Egypt's history, there would be 30 dynasties who would rule Egypt. The next time period is the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom was a period in Egyptian history that lasted for about 500 years, from 2700 to 2200 BC. During the Old Kingdom, Egyptians continued to develop their political system. The system they developed was based on their belief that the pharaoh was sent to earth by the gods to help manage and control Egypt. This meant that the pharaoh had absolute power in Egypt. The Old Kingdom was a time of peace for Egypt. Therefore, major construction projects were created. The Great Pyramids and the Sphinx in Giza were created during the Old Kingdom. Hieroglyphics were standardized. Hieroglyphics were the Egyptian system of writing using pictures and symbols to represent letters and words. Hieroglyphics being standardized, meaning that everyone used the same symbols and words across the kingdom. The Old Kingdom ended when nobles began to compete for control of Egypt. Towards the end of the Old Kingdom, Egypt had a population of about 2 million people. As the population grew, social classes developed. The Egyptian social hierarchy went as follows. If we look at it as a pyramid, the pharaoh was at the top. He ruled Egypt as a god. Then you had nobles, who were people from rich and powerful families, priests and government officials. The next is scribes and craftspeople, and the last section are your farmers, servants, and slaves. This last section of the social hierarchy made up 80% of Egypt's population. Egyptians believed that a well-ordered society would keep their kingdom strong. The Middle Kingdom. At the end of the Old Kingdom, the wealth and power of the pharaohs declined. Nobles gained control of Egypt for 160 years. This meant that Egypt did not have a central ruler. Around 2050 BC, a powerful pharaoh named Menhotep II regained control and united Egypt once again. His rule began the Middle Kingdom, which was a period of order and stability in Egypt that lasted till about 1750 BC. During the Middle Kingdom, Egypt became an international power by conquering Nubia and expanding trade routes. The Middle Kingdom comes to an end when a group of people from Southwest Asia, called the Hyksos, gained control of Lower Egypt. In the mid-1500s, Amos of Thebes declared himself king and drove out the Hyksos. This marked the start of the New Kingdom. The New Kingdom is a time period where Egypt reached the height of its glory and power. After the Hyksos invasion, Egyptian leaders feared future invasions. Therefore, they took control of all possible invasion routes into Egypt. Egypt began to become an empire with its military victories over Syria, the kingdom of Cush, and Nubia. These conquests made Egypt rich in trade and power. The New Kingdom eventually came to an end, though, when they were conquered by the Assyrians. Some of the famous pharaohs during the New Kingdom were Queen Hatshepsut. Her husband actually died at a young age, so she took power and it actually increased trade in Egypt. What's interesting is that she would dress like a man and call herself king because people did not think a woman had the right to rule in Egypt. You have Amenhotep IV, which attempted to oppose monotheism in Egypt. Monotheism is belief in one God. You have Ramses II, which is Ramses the Great. He was a strong military leader who greatly increased the size of his kingdom, and he signed a treaty with the Hittites. Religion to the Egyptians was very important. Egyptians were polytheistic. They built temples to their god all over their kingdom. Temples would actually collect payments from the worshipers and the government. This payment allowed for temples to grow. Much of the Egyptian religion is focused on the afterlife, meaning life after death. They believed in the idea of Ka. Ka was a person's life force. They believed when a person died, his or her Ka left their body and became a spirit. The Ka, however, was linked to the body and could not leave the burial site. Therefore, to fulfill these needs of the Ka, or this person's spirit, people would be buried with objects like furniture, clothing, jewelry, weapons. Relatives of the dead were expected to bring food and water or something to drink to the tomb so that the Ka would not go hungry or thirsty. Egyptians believed that the body had to be preserved after death. Therefore, they developed a method called embalming. They would preserve the bodies as mummies. However, only Egypt's wealthy could afford to have mummies made. So if a family could not afford the process of mummification, they would bury their dead in a shallow grave at the edge of a desert. The hot, dry sand would actually preserve the bodies of the dead naturally. Some of the Egyptian achievements are, they created a writing system called hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics, or the Egyptian hieroglyphics, has over 600 symbols. They created papyrus, which was a long-lasting paper-like material from reeds. And they had what was called the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is a stone slab inscribed with hieroglyphics. It was discovered in 1799 by a French soldier. It allowed for historians to be able to read Egyptian hieroglyphics. How that worked was this soldier found this stone slab with all these pictures on, hieroglyphics on it, and actually Greek was written on there as well, so they could translate the Greek and realize that the Greek matched the symbols of the hieroglyphics, so historians could now read the Egyptian hieroglyphics.